5 of the country's top doctors looked a billionaire in the eye and told him there was nothing more to do, that his 7-year-old son had a rare, aggressive cancer and only 2 months left to live. No treatment would work. No surgery was possible. They said to prepare for the end. But while the world gave up on that little boy, one person didn't. She wasn't a doctor. She wasn't famous. She was the Maid. And what she discovered, alone, without support, without a degree, didn't just prove the experts wrong. She not only saved the boy's life, but also uncovered something that had been sitting right under their noses the entire time. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Oliver was only 7 years old when doctors gave him the worst possible news. He had a rare type of cancer that had spread through his trachea and lungs. Because of the tumor's location and severity, Oliver couldn't speak clearly anymore. His breathing was heavy and slow, and he often coughed or gasped for air. He was no longer able to walk on his own, so he used a wheelchair most of the time. His body was weak, and he needed help with almost everything. His father, William Hargrove, a very rich man known for his success in real estate, didn't waste time. He immediately arranged for Oliver to be seen by the 5 most respected cancer doctors in the country. Each one ran tests and reviewed scans, but every single doctor came back with the same conclusion: Oliver's cancer could not be removed, could not be treated, and he had 2 months left to live. William couldn't believe it. He had already lost the love of his life when Oliver was born. His wife died during childbirth, and since then, he had focused all his energy on raising Oliver the best way he could. Hearing that his son was going to die made everything collapse around him. For a man who could buy almost anything in the world, this was something he couldn't fix with money. He begged the doctors to try experimental treatments, to contact hospitals overseas, or to explore any solution that hadn't been tested yet. But the answer was always the same: nothing could be done. The cancer was too advanced, and it was in a place that was too dangerous to operate. Medicine wouldn't help. Radiation wouldn't help. They all gently told him to prepare for the end. They advised him to enjoy the remaining time with Oliver, to make it meaningful. The doctors explained things clearly. The cancer had wrapped itself around the windpipe and filled parts of the lungs. Even if they tried surgery, they would risk killing Oliver on the operating table. Any attempt to remove the tumor would damage his ability to breathe completely, and no known drug had any effect on this kind of aggressive cancer. William sat in silence while listening to these explanations. He watched as Oliver struggled to lift a cup or push the buttons on the remote control. The boy who once ran around the house laughing was now unable to play or talk like he used to. He slept most of the day and was often in pain. Sometimes he cried, not because he was scared, but because he didn't understand why he couldn't get better. William felt helpless. He didn't know what to say to his son, or how to deal with the idea that he might soon be gone forever. Even the nurses and hospital staff had a sad but kind tone when speaking to William. They had seen cases like this before. They knew when a child's condition was beyond saving. Some even gave advice on how to prepare emotionally, what support groups to join, and how to explain things to young children in gentle ways. One of them told William about a hospice program where Oliver could stay at home during his last weeks, surrounded by familiar things. William nodded, thanked them, and took every brochure they offered. But deep inside, he wasn't ready to say goodbye. Every time he looked at Oliver's pale face or heard his slow breathing during the night, it felt like a countdown had already started. The house that used to feel warm and full of joy now felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the end of something precious. Some relatives and friends visited to show support. They brought small gifts for Oliver and tried to cheer him up, but the atmosphere was heavy. No one knew what to say. William avoided talking about the future. Instead, he focused on the moment, helping Oliver eat, adjusting his oxygen tube, sitting beside him while he watched cartoons. The two of them had quiet days, sometimes filled with silence, sometimes filled with short conversations when Oliver had the energy. There were moments when William smiled at his son's small jokes or held his hand tightly when Oliver's breathing got worse. The idea that this life, this connection, was going to disappear soon made William feel like he was drowning in sadness. But still, he stayed strong in front of Oliver. He didn't cry where the boy could see. He always tried to smile, even when everything felt broken inside. But not everyone in the house had given up. There was someone or something that didn't accept this future. It might have been a person or a presence, or maybe a force driven by love, denial, or stubborn hope. While the doctors focused on what medicine could do, and while William faced his grief and tried to be present for his son, this presence began to take action. Somewhere in that quiet home, plans were being made. Something or someone still believed there was a way to change what everyone else had already accepted. It didn't matter how small the chance was or how impossible the situation looked. This presence refused to let Oliver's story end this way. While everyone talked about time running out, this part of the house was still fighting, silently preparing for what would come next. A fight against the final diagnosis. Camilla had been working as the housekeeper in the Hargrove mansion for almost 3 years. She was quiet, calm, and always respectful. Most of the time, the family barely noticed her presence. She didn't speak unless someone asked her something directly. But every day, she was the one who stayed close to Oliver. She was there from the early morning until late at night. She brought his juices in small cups with colorful straws, gave him his daily baths with warm water, prepared his medication at the right time, and helped him get into bed carefully so he wouldn't be in pain. Oliver had grown attached to her. He didn't see her just as a maid. To him, she was his second mum. When the nights were hard and the pain made him scared, it was Camilla who stayed beside him, holding his hand, listening to his quiet crying, and whispering comforting words in his ear. She never tried to take the place of his real mother. She knew that was not her role. But Oliver had never known his mum since she passed away the day he was born. Camilla had filled a space in his life without even trying. She just did what needed to be done. She never left him alone during the hardest days. When he felt sick, it was Camilla who cleaned up the mess, wiped his face, and made sure he was okay. She didn't flinch or complain. She sat beside him when he watched cartoons, even if he fell asleep halfway through the show. She read him stories, even when he didn't answer back. She stayed silent most of the time, but her presence was steady, and Oliver trusted her deeply. He would look for her first when he woke up. For him, Camilla wasn't just staff, she was family, even if the rest of the house didn't see it that way. Camilla had a deep reason for acting the way she did. Years ago, she had a daughter. Her name was Louisa, a sweet and happy girl who loved singing and playing with toy animals. But one day, Louisa got sick. It seemed like a simple fever at first, and the doctor said it was nothing serious. They gave her basic medicine and told Camilla to let her rest. But things got worse quickly. Camilla begged the doctors to run more tests, but no one listened. By the time they found the real problem, it was too late. Her daughter died from a condition that could have been treated if caught early. The pain of losing her was something Camilla never forgot. After that, she made a decision. She would never again trust words alone. She would learn everything she could, how to read medical tests, how to understand symptoms, how to hear between the lines of what doctors said. She didn't go to medical school, but she became an expert in her own way. Camilla spent her nights reading online about diseases, medicines, symptoms, and treatments. She watched interviews with doctors, read medical papers, and studied every report that passed through the house. Whenever Oliver had an appointment, Camilla listened carefully, even when no one was talking to her directly. She watched the doctors' faces, how they spoke, and how they avoided questions. She paid attention to Oliver's reactions too. She knew every cough, every wince, every moment when his breathing changed, and little by little, a strange feeling started growing inside her. Something didn't make sense. She had seen people dying before. She had seen how fast it usually happened, how the body would show signs of giving up. But Oliver didn't seem like that. Despite everything, he smiled. He talked about the future. He wanted to play. He didn't act like someone who was dying. Every day, Camilla saw something that the doctors had missed. The boy had energy sometimes, even if only for a few minutes. His eyes were bright. He didn't seem like someone who only had weeks left to live. Of course, he was sick. There was no doubt about that. But there was something about the way he reacted to the world around him. The light in his face, the way he laughed when something funny happened on TV, the way he tried to joke with her when she gave him medicine. It didn't fit the image of a terminal case. She started going back over every test result she had seen. She reviewed the names of the medications. She checked side effects and compared timelines. She stayed up at night looking for other possibilities. The doubt in her heart was getting stronger. What if the doctors were wrong? What if Oliver's diagnosis wasn't the end? Camilla didn't want to believe in false hope. She didn't want to make promises she couldn't keep. But as the days passed, the doubt became a real thought, and that thought slowly turned into a quiet belief. Maybe there was something missing in the diagnosis. Maybe they overlooked something, or maybe there was a different condition that looked the same but had a different treatment. Camilla didn't know what the answer was, but she knew one thing clearly. She had seen death before, and this wasn't it. Oliver was fighting. His body was weak, but his spirit was strong. He still dreamed, he still had joy. And now, Camilla couldn't ignore what she felt. The same pain that once broke her was now pushing her to act. The woman who had been silent for so long was beginning to see something no one else did. The doubt in her heart was turning into certainty. It was a rainy afternoon. The sky was grey, and the sound of water hitting the windows filled the room. Inside, Oliver was lying on his bed, feeling tired as usual. Camilla sat next to him with a small portable ultrasound machine. She had started using it to help relax the muscles in his neck and chest. It was a way to comfort him and check if anything felt different. As she moved the device slowly over his skin, Oliver looked at her. His eyes were wet, not from pain, but from something deeper. Then in a quiet voice he asked, "Am I going to live, Mommy?" Camilla froze. Her heart sank. That sentence came out of nowhere, soft but heavy. It was the same question he had asked his father a few days earlier, a question that had gone unanswered. But now, hearing it again directly from his lips, Camilla couldn't stay still. Her hand started shaking. Camilla tried to stay calm. She didn't want Oliver to see that his words had shaken her. But inside, she was falling apart. She gently placed her other hand on his chest to steady herself, then looked at the screen of the ultrasound machine. As she moved the probe slightly to the left, something on the monitor caught her attention. There was a dark shape on the image. It didn't look like what she had seen in the previous scans. This wasn't part of the tumor described in the medical reports. It looked too small and too specific, almost like it was in a separate area. Camilla narrowed her eyes and focused, trying to trace its size and shape. She moved the probe back and forth. It was clearly there. She had gone over Oliver's files many times. This wasn't on any of them. What was this? Her heart beat faster, but she tried not to show it. At that exact moment, William walked into the room. He had just returned from a call with one of the doctors. He wasn't expecting anything unusual, just another quiet moment with his son. But as he stepped in, he heard the last words from Oliver's mouth. "Am I going to live, Mommy?" William froze in place. His hands dropped to his sides. He felt like all the air had left his body. For a second he didn't move or speak. His eyes slowly filled with tears, but he didn't make a sound. He just stood there and looked at his son, who had no idea how deeply that question had cut both adults in the room. William had no answer. The last time Oliver asked him that, he just stayed quiet. He couldn't lie to his son, but he also couldn't tell him the truth. That silence had stayed with him for days. Now, it was happening again. Camilla knew she had to speak. She couldn't let the boy go through another moment of silence. She looked at Oliver, then at William, then back at the monitor. She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes quickly, and spoke in a quiet, steady voice. "You will, my love," she said. "Mommy number 2 will find out how." Her words were soft, but full of certainty. William looked at her, surprised. She'd never made such a bold promise before, but she wasn't just saying it to comfort the child. Camilla meant it. She pointed at the screen and showed William the image. "Look," she said. "This wasn't in the reports. It's new. Or maybe it was missed." William walked closer and looked. He didn't understand much about ultrasounds, but he trusted Camilla's judgment. She had spent more time with Oliver than anyone. If she saw something strange, it meant something. For the first time, William saw a tiny flicker of hope. The room stayed quiet, but the mood had changed. Camilla saved the ultrasound image and wrote down some notes on a piece of paper. She wanted to compare it with the old files again. Maybe the doctors hadn't seen this area. Maybe they had used a different angle, or maybe the tumor wasn't what they thought it was. There was now a real reason to look deeper. Camilla didn't want to jump to conclusions, but she felt something different in her chest. A strong instinct. She had ignored it once in her life, and it had cost her daughter. She wouldn't make that mistake again. William sat on the edge of the bed and held Oliver's hand. He didn't speak, but this time his silence didn't feel like fear. It felt like he was finally seeing a small light in the middle of all the darkness. The boy smiled weakly, unaware of what had just changed. Camilla turned off the ultrasound machine and placed it on the table. She gently helped Oliver lie back, fixed his blanket, and kissed his forehead. He looked calmer now, like her answer had brought him peace, even if just for a moment. William stayed close, his eyes still on the monitor, his mind racing. Camilla turned to him and said, "I want to send this to someone. Not one of your doctors, someone else." William didn't argue. He nodded. If Camilla believed there was something worth looking into, he would support it. The rain outside continued steady and quiet. But something inside that room had shifted. A sentence that could have broken everyone had instead sparked a new question. What if they were wrong? What if Oliver's case wasn't what the report said? Camilla looked at the boy one more time and repeated with even more certainty, "You will, my love. Mommy number 2 will figure it out." She had printed the most recent medical report for Oliver and placed it side by side with her notes. Next to them was the video she had recorded earlier using the portable ultrasound machine. On her laptop screen, the pause frame clearly showed the shape she had seen, a strange round mass located right next to the trachea cartilage. She zoomed in and studied it carefully. According to the doctor's reports, the tumor was supposed to be diffuse and spread throughout the airway and lungs, with no clear borders. But this image didn't match that description. What she was seeing looked like one single lump, very defined, sitting in one place. Something wasn't right. She had spent years studying medical patterns on her own, and this didn't fit the typical profile of the kind of cancer the doctors had described. It felt wrong. Camilla didn't waste time. She carefully copied the video to a USB drive and printed some screenshots from the ultrasound. She remembered someone who might help, Dr. Henrique, a retired physician who had been a close friend of her late sister. He used to be a respected doctor in his day, and even after retirement, he still read medical journals and followed unusual cases for his own interest. Camilla called him early in the morning and asked if she could visit. She didn't tell him everything over the phone, just said it was urgent and about a child. When she arrived at his house later that day, he greeted her warmly and invited her in. They sat at the dining table. Camilla pulled out her materials and explained what she had seen. Then she handed him the USB drive so he could view the video. Dr. Henrique plugged it into his laptop and started watching closely. He didn't speak for a long time. He watched the video once, then played it again. He zoomed in, adjusted the contrast, and rewound it. His face was serious the entire time. Camilla sat across the table, her hands clenched. Her heart was racing. After a few more minutes, he finally stopped the video and looked at her. "Camilla," he said slowly, "this doesn't look like a tumor." She blinked in confusion. "What?" she asked. "This is not cancer," he repeated. "It looks like a calcified infection. A rare one, yes, but not cancer. I've seen this before, in 1 or 2 cases years ago." Camilla couldn't believe what she was hearing. She leaned forward. "Can it be treated?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes. If this is what I think it is, it can be removed surgically. It's a tricky procedure, but nowhere near as dangerous as what those doctors described. This isn't terminal, Camilla. It's curable." Her whole body felt cold and warm at the same time. She had expected some doubts, maybe more questions, but not this. Not a complete reversal of everything the top 5 doctors in the country had said. She asked him again, just to be sure. "Are you saying they got it wrong?" He nodded again. "I believe they misread the scans. The signs are similar, especially if they're looking for a tumor, but this shape, the location, the consistency, it fits more with a calcified granuloma. It's rare, but not unheard of." Camilla remembered all the medical terms from her nights of reading. This one she had never come across before. She asked him what it meant in simple terms. "It means," he said, "that it's an infection your body tried to seal off, and it became hard like stone, but it's not cancer. It doesn't spread. And yes, it can be removed." Her eyes filled with tears. All this time, everyone believed that Oliver was dying. The top specialists had told his father to prepare for the worst. They had looked at the same area and called it inoperable, terminal, hopeless. But this man, sitting in a quiet house with no clinic, no fancy machines, had seen the truth. She stood up and began pacing. "What do I do now?" she asked. Dr. Henrique leaned back and thought. "You'll need to take this to someone who listens. A surgeon, maybe someone who still remembers how to think outside the box, and bring your evidence, all of it." Camilla nodded quickly. She already knew where to start. William had money, power, and contacts. If she showed him this and explained it clearly, he might believe her. He had to. This wasn't just a guess. It was proof. Real, visible, undeniable proof. With new hope burning inside her, Camilla packed everything carefully. She made digital copies of the video and printed more images. She planned how to present it, step by step. First to William, then to another specialist for a second opinion. She wasn't a doctor and she knew that, but what she had seen and what Dr. Henrique had confirmed couldn't be ignored. Oliver didn't have to die. That sentence repeated in her mind over and over. It gave her strength. She didn't sleep that night. She stayed awake, organizing files, writing notes, and preparing to face anyone who would question her. For the first time in months, she felt something close to relief. Not because the fight was over, but because now there was a real chance to win. She looked one last time at the image from the ultrasound, the one that changed everything. Now, she just needed to prove it to the world. Camilla arrived at the hospital early in the morning. She had everything with her: The video from the portable ultrasound, printed images, and a written report comparing Oliver's diagnosis with the findings from Dr. Henrique. Her hands were shaking, but she was determined. She asked to speak to one of the doctors responsible for Oliver's case. After waiting for over an hour in the hallway, she was called into a room. The doctor barely looked at her before she started explaining. She pointed at the images and described the differences. She mentioned the possibility of a misdiagnosis and said it might not be cancer at all. The doctor interrupted her. His face turned serious, but not in a respectful way. He looked annoyed. Then he said, "With all due respect, you clean floors. We went to medical school." Another doctor laughed quietly in the corner. Camilla felt humiliated, but she didn't back down. She repeated her words again. She went to a second doctor, then a third. The response was always the same. They dismissed her before even looking at the evidence. One doctor said she had probably misunderstood what she saw. Another said if it were that simple, real professionals would have caught it. No one took her seriously. She was just the housemaid in their eyes, not someone who could challenge a team of top specialists. One even accused her of creating confusion that could hurt the family emotionally. Camilla felt her chest burn with frustration. She didn't want attention. She didn't want credit. She just wanted someone to take a serious look. But the walls of the hospital were thick, and so were the egos. With every rejection, her anger grew. But more than that, her fear grew too. Oliver was getting worse. His energy was lower each day. He was eating less, breathing slower. Camilla knew time was running out. She tried reaching William at home, but this time it wasn't that simple. She was told he wasn't available. When she insisted, she was stopped by the family's lawyers. They said she was creating false hope and that what she was doing was dangerous. One of them warned that if she continued interfering with medical decisions, she could be removed from the house entirely. Camilla felt trapped. She had lived in that house for almost 3 years. She had taken care of Oliver every single day. Now, when she had something that could save his life, they were shutting her out. She went back to her room that night and cried. But not because of the insults or the way they treated her. She cried because Oliver didn't have time to wait for them to open their eyes. He needed help now. She sat up in bed, wiped her face, and decided that if they wouldn't help, she would find someone who would. She stayed up all night, searching online. She looked for doctors who had experience with rare conditions in children. She typed in keywords related to misdiagnosis, trachea infections, and surgical corrections. After hours of searching, she found a name: Dr. Adrian Keller. He was a world-renowned pediatric diagnostician, known for reviewing difficult cases and spotting errors others missed. He had worked with hospitals in several countries and had published books on rare diseases. Most people would never have direct access to someone like him, but Camilla didn't let that stop her. She found an old email address from a medical article and sent a message. In the email, she explained everything. She attached the video, screenshots, and her notes. She told him about Oliver's story, the hospital's rejection, and the timeline. She asked for help, not as a doctor, but as someone who had nothing else to try. Then she waited, heart racing, hoping for a miracle. 2 days later, Camilla received a reply. It was short, but clear. "Send the boy. Immediately." That was all it said. But for her, it was everything. She printed the message and ran to the house. She asked to speak to William again. This time, she didn't accept being pushed away. She waited by the hallway for over an hour until he finally walked in. He looked tired, emotionally worn down, like a man carrying more than he could handle. Camilla handed him the paper and said, "Please read this." He read it silently. Then he looked at her. "Who is this doctor?" he asked. She explained everything she had learned about Dr. Keller. William didn't respond right away. His face was unsure. He had trusted the best doctors in the country, but then Camilla said, "Just look at Oliver's eyes. He still wants to live." William didn't speak, but he turned to walk upstairs. Later that night, William went to Oliver's room. The boy was awake barely, but his eyes opened when his father entered. William sat next to him. Oliver didn't say much, just smiled weakly. Then he whispered, "Did the second mum find something?" William looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said, "she did." The next day, the house was busy. Bags were packed, medical records were printed, tickets were booked. William had made his choice. They were flying out to meet Dr. Keller. It was risky, but it was also their only chance. Camilla stood near the door, watching the boy being carried carefully into the car. She felt a deep weight lift from her shoulders. This wasn't the end. Not yet. It might be the last chance they had, or maybe it was the first real chance. The start of something that no one had believed possible, except her. The trip was kept completely secret. William didn't want anyone from the press or hospital finding out. He contacted a private aviation company and chartered a jet for the next morning. Only a small group knew about the flight, just William, Camilla, Oliver, and 2 medical professionals hired to provide support during the journey. Everything was done quietly. The staff at the house was told the family was taking time away. William didn't explain further. Camilla packed a small bag for herself and helped pack Oliver's things. They brought medications, oxygen supplies, and all medical documents, including Camilla's video and the message from Dr. Keller. On the plane, Oliver was tired but excited. He asked if this trip would help him get better. Camilla smiled and said yes. William sat quietly holding a folder with all the test results. The flight was long but calm. When they landed, a car was waiting to take them straight to the clinic. The clinic was located in a quiet area outside the city. It was modern and clean, but not huge like the hospitals back home. Dr. Keller met them at the entrance. He didn't wear a white coat, just a simple shirt and jeans. He shook William's hand, greeted Camilla with respect, and leaned down to speak kindly to Oliver. Then he got straight to work. Within an hour, new tests had started. They used more advanced scanning machines, more precise imaging, and a complete blood panel. Everything was fast, but organized. Camilla watched every step carefully. William stayed close to Oliver the whole time. That evening, Dr. Keller returned with the results. He didn't hesitate. "This is not cancer," he said. "It's a granuloma. A hard lump caused by an untreated infection. It looks like cancer, but it isn't." Camilla closed her eyes and let out a long breath. William sat down. He didn't speak, he just stared at the floor. Dr. Keller explained everything. A granuloma like this is usually caused by a respiratory infection that the body tries to isolate. It wraps the infection in calcium, forming a solid mass. That's why the shape looked like a tumor on the scans. It presses on the trachea and causes trouble breathing, talking, and moving. But it doesn't spread like cancer. It doesn't destroy healthy cells. And most importantly, it can be removed. The treatment was clear, a simple endoscopic surgery to extract the granuloma, followed by antibiotics to make sure the infection didn't return. The recovery time was short, just a few weeks. William looked up. His face showed disbelief and relief all at once. "So you're saying my son is not dying?" he asked. "No," the doctor answered. "He's not." William finally broke down. He put his face in his hands and cried quietly. For months, he had trusted experts, and all of them had been wrong. Camilla sat in silence, holding back her own tears. She didn't want to cry, not yet. She needed to stay focused. Dr. Keller showed them the scan side by side with the old one. The difference was clear. What 5 doctors had called terminal cancer was actually a removable lump. It was shocking. William couldn't understand how this had happened. 5 doctors, he repeated. 5 experts. Not one of them saw this. Camilla looked at him but didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth was obvious now. The woman who cleaned the house and served breakfast had saved his son's life. Not because she was lucky, but because she had paid attention. Because she cared, Oliver would have died if no one had listened. Now he had a second chance. They scheduled the surgery for 2 days later. Until then, Oliver rested in a hospital room with new machines, new doctors, and real hope for the first time. The day of the surgery arrived. Oliver was nervous but calm. Camilla held his hand as they prepared him. William stood nearby, watching everything closely. The medical team explained every step of the process. The surgery would be done through the throat using a small camera and tools. There would be no major cuts. It would take less than 2 hours. Once Oliver was taken to the operating room, William and Camilla waited in a private room. They didn't speak much. The clock moved slowly. After 1 hour and 40 minutes, Dr. Keller walked in. "It's done," he said. "It went perfectly. The granuloma is out." "He's already waking up." William covered his face with both hands, shaking. Camilla sat still, her eyes wide. "He's going to be okay?" she asked. The doctor smiled. "Yes, very okay." They were allowed to see him soon after. Oliver was sleepy but awake. His eyes opened, and he looked around slowly. When Oliver saw them, he smiled. A real, full smile, the first in weeks. Then he spoke. His voice was clear. No gasping, no struggle. "Hi," he said. Camilla burst into tears. William couldn't speak. He walked forward, knelt beside the bed and took Oliver's hand. The boy breathed deeply and said, "It doesn't hurt anymore." William laughed through his tears. "It's over," he said. Camilla stood beside them, one hand on Oliver's shoulder, the other covering her mouth as she tried not to sob. All the fear, all the months of pain, the frustration, the rejection, it all led to this moment, a moment that proved they were right to keep fighting. Oliver wasn't dying, he was healing, and the woman they ignored, questioned, and underestimated had been the one who made it possible. It wasn't a miracle, it was truth. It had been there all along, and now, finally, everyone could see it. The story leaked. It started with a small blog post by someone in the medical community who had heard about the case through a friend. The headline was simple but powerful. "Billionaire's son misdiagnosed as terminal, saved by housemaid." Within hours, it was picked up by a local news website. By the end of the day, it had spread to major newspapers and TV networks. Social media exploded. People were shocked that 5 highly respected doctors had failed to correctly diagnose a child's condition, and even more shocked that it was a housemaid, not a doctor, who had spotted the mistake. Forums, podcasts, and health news programs were filled with people debating what had happened. Some defended the doctors, others criticized the system. But one thing was clear, the story had captured everyone's attention. It was no longer just about Oliver. It had become a national and soon international discussion about trust, power, and the limits of expertise. Within the week, the story had gone global. News anchors around the world repeated the same basic facts. A young boy, wrongly declared terminally ill, had been saved by the careful attention of the woman who took care of him daily. TV shows invited specialists to talk about how such a mistake could happen. Hashtags like "Listen to the Caregivers" and "Medical Humility" began trending. Camilla's name was everywhere. People started comparing her to whistleblowers and heroes who had saved lives despite having no formal authority. Journalists called non-stop asking for interviews. Her old neighborhood became crowded with reporters. Some people came just to take pictures of her former home. Universities offered her honorary degrees. NGOs wanted her to speak at events. Even health ministers from other countries asked to meet her. But Camilla stayed quiet. She ignored most messages and declined every interview. She didn't want attention. She didn't care about fame. She only wanted people to finally listen to those who care silently. Camilla made one public statement in public. She didn't read it in front of cameras or appear on any live show. Instead, she typed it and gave it to one trusted journalist. It was one sentence. Nobody listens to those who serve, but the ones who care up close see what others refuse to see. That sentence was quoted in newspapers, printed on posters, and turned into a meme across the internet. People discussed its meaning in classrooms and boardrooms. Some used it to talk about social class. Others connected it to race or gender. But no matter the angle, everyone understood the message. People who work in the background, the ones who are often ignored, sometimes know more than the ones in charge. It wasn't just about Camilla anymore. It was about the nurse who notices something wrong, the janitor who hears things others don't, the assistant who pays attention when others overlook. Camilla had reminded the world of something important. Meanwhile, William was dealing with his own emotions. He had believed every word the original doctors said. He followed every instruction. He didn't question their authority, and because of that, he nearly lost his son. The guilt hit him hard. He felt like he had failed Oliver. He also realized how quickly he had dismissed Camilla's warnings at first. To make things right, he hired a team of investigators to look into the actions of the 5 doctors who had handled the case. He didn't care about the cost. He wanted the truth. The doctors, once confident and respected, now faced public scrutiny. Some tried to explain themselves. Others stayed silent. One even claimed it was a misunderstanding, but the evidence was strong. William's team uncovered emails, medical reports, and appointment notes showing that the doctors had rushed the diagnosis and ignored signs that didn't match. It wasn't just a mistake. It was professional negligence, plain and simple. The official medical board reviewed everything. After weeks of analysis, they released a public report. It confirmed what Camilla and Dr. Keller already knew. The diagnosis had been wrong from the beginning. The doctors had followed a generic protocol based on incomplete data. They hadn't considered alternative explanations or performed deeper analysis. The board called it a case of systemic arrogance and failure to reassess. It also stated that Oliver's life had been put at serious risk because of professional overconfidence. Disciplinary actions were taken. Licenses were reviewed. Some doctors were suspended. Others were ordered to take retraining. The news of the board's ruling was covered widely. William read every page of the report. For the first time in a long while, he felt like justice had been done. He still carried guilt, but he also knew he had taken action when it mattered. And now he was standing on the right side of the story, not just as a father, but as a man. Camilla didn't celebrate. She didn't want to. To her, the victory wasn't in the punishment of the doctors or the fame that followed. The real victory was Oliver, alive, healing, and laughing again. She spent her days helping him with simple tasks, just like before, feeding him, helping with his exercises, playing board games, reading stories. The media eventually moved on to other topics, as they always do. But inside that house, everything had changed. William gave her the respect she had always deserved. He asked for her opinion, listened to her, and made sure she was treated as part of the family. Oliver, now recovering faster each day, would often say, "She didn't just save my life, she believed in it." And for Camilla, that was enough. The world had turned upside down. Status, titles, and money had failed. Care, presence, and attention had saved the day. And this time, the world had finally seen it. William made a decision that surprised many people. He created a new medical foundation in Oliver's name. Its mission was simple but powerful: to review terminal diagnoses, especially in children, and make sure no one else was sent home to die without real certainty. He named Camilla as the director. People in his circle questioned him. She wasn't a doctor, she had no formal degree, and she had never worked in an office before. But William didn't care. He knew no one was better for the job. Camilla had proven she could see what others ignored. She understood the human side of medicine. Her job wasn't to give medical opinions, but to lead, to ask the right questions, and to make sure every case got the full attention it deserved. She accepted the role quietly. There was no big event, no red carpet. She just walked into the office, sat at the desk, and got to work. The story of Camilla and Oliver had already changed the medical world. After their case went public, hospitals across the country started offering diagnosis review programs. Families who had been told there was no hope now had a place to turn. Thousands of people began asking for second opinions, especially when something felt off. Medical boards started reviewing their internal protocols. Universities added new lectures on humility in diagnosis and the importance of patient observation. Camilla's name was often brought up in these discussions. She didn't attend these events. She preferred to stay with Oliver. That's where she felt useful, giving him his medicine, preparing his meals, helping with his schoolwork. She still watched him closely, even though he was now healthy. It was hard for her to forget the months when every breath had felt like it could be his last. But now, every day was a reminder that love, attention, and persistence could save lives. Oliver was no longer the quiet, tired boy who spent most of his days in bed. He was back to being a child, full of energy, laughter, and curiosity. He ran through the garden, played soccer with his father, and asked hundreds of questions about everything. He loved animals and dreamed of becoming a vet. His body was strong again. His voice was loud and clear. He even returned to school and made new friends. Camilla picked him up every day and always packed his favorite snacks. William watched all of this with quiet joy. He often stood at the window, smiling as Oliver played. The guilt from the past didn't disappear, but it changed. It became fuel. He wanted to do better. He wanted to make sure other parents didn't make the same mistakes he had. And more than anything, he wanted to support Camilla, who had not only saved his son's life, but also given it meaning again. William and Camilla started spending more time together, not as boss and employee, but as partners in something deeper. He respected her in a way he never had before. They had long conversations about life, about mistakes, about family. Camilla shared stories about her daughter, and William listened without interrupting. He told her how scared he had been during Oliver's worst moments. They understood each other. They both had experienced deep loss, and they both had fought against something bigger than themselves. Their connection grew slowly, naturally. There were no romantic promises or dramatic changes, just mutual care and trust. William no longer saw Camilla as part of the staff. She was part of his family, and Oliver saw it too. He would sometimes hold both their hands and say, "We're a team, right?" They always answered yes, because now everything had changed. The house that once felt dark and quiet was full of life again. Oliver, still young but now wiser than most kids his age, began writing letters. Not emails, but real letters, with colored pens and stickers. He sent them to other children who were in hospitals or going through difficult treatments. His message was always the same: never believe only what the doctors say. Sometimes what you need is someone who really loves you and doesn't give up. These letters brought hope to children and their families. Some wrote back, others sent drawings. A few even said they asked for second opinions after reading Oliver's words. He felt proud knowing his story helped others. Camilla kept every reply in a box in his room. When Oliver had a tough day, she would open it and read one out loud. They called it their hope box. Oliver said that if one kid got saved because of his story, then all the pain had been worth it. And Camilla agreed with all her heart. Camilla had become more than a name in a newspaper headline. She was now a symbol. To some, she represented the voice of people who are usually ignored. To others, she proved that love and attention can sometimes see more than experience and education. And to Oliver, she was still mommy number 2, the one who had stayed, who had fought, and who had never let him give up. William continued funding the foundation, but it was Camilla who ran it, shaped it, and gave it purpose. She didn't want fame or praise. She only wanted to make sure that no other child would be told to die without someone asking one more time, "Are we sure?" The story of Camilla and Oliver wasn't about luck. It was about timing, love, and courage. Two hearts, one fighting to survive, the other refusing to let go, met at the right moment, and together they changed everything. The 5 doctors responsible for Oliver's misdiagnosis were summoned to an internal medical trial. The case had gained so much public attention that the medical board decided to act quickly. The investigation was long, with detailed reviews of medical files, interviews, and testimonies. Camilla was called to speak. She sat in front of a panel of professionals who once wouldn't have let her enter their office. This time, they listened. She explained everything: what she saw, what she questioned, and how they treated her when she brought her concerns. One doctor tried to defend himself, saying the tumor looked real. But when the ultrasound footage and new test results were shown, his argument collapsed. In the end, the board made its decision. 3 of the doctors had their licenses suspended for multiple years. One, who ignored warning signs and refused to order further tests, was permanently banned from practicing medicine. They had failed to do their jobs. The 5th doctor, the one who had laughed at Camilla and told her she cleaned floors, faced more than a suspension. During the investigation, they uncovered other cases where he had ignored test results, altered documents, and rushed diagnoses to save time. One patient had even died from complications he failed to address. These discoveries shocked the board and the public. He wasn't just careless. He had committed medical fraud. Legal action was taken. He was arrested, charged, and later sentenced for negligence and falsifying medical records. His downfall became headline news. Articles referred to him as the man who mocked a maid and failed a child. The hospital where Oliver was treated faced consequences too. The court ordered them to pay a large compensation to the family, not just for the misdiagnosis, but for emotional distress, mistreatment, and the danger Oliver had been exposed to. It was one of the biggest settlements in that hospital's history. The media had a field day. News sites published articles titled "The Blind Men in White Coats" and "How Arrogance Nearly Killed a Child." Talk shows debated the role of power, class, and responsibility in medicine. People began to question the automatic trust often placed in medical professionals without second thought. Discussions about second opinions, patient rights, and the importance of listening to caregivers became common. For many, this was a wake-up call. Camilla, who once had no voice in those halls, became a symbol of accountability. She didn't ask for revenge, and she never once celebrated the doctor's punishment. Her only concern was that no other child would suffer because of someone's refusal to listen. When asked how she felt seeing the doctors punished, she simply said, "I hope they learn something." To her, justice wasn't about punishment. It was about change. And now, change was happening. Slowly, but for the first time, publicly and clearly. Camilla received a letter from a global health organization inviting her to a forum on medical ethics and human care. She didn't know what to expect. She was not a doctor. She had no degree. But she accepted the invitation because the message was bigger than her title. At the event, surrounded by professionals from around the world, she stepped onto the stage. She was nervous but calm. She told the story from the beginning. Oliver, the misdiagnosis, the ultrasound, the silence, and the fight to be heard. Everyone listened. At the end of her speech, she said something that would be remembered long after. Listen to what is not on paper. Look at what tests don't show. And never underestimate someone who truly loves. The room stood in silence. then burst into applause. Her words were quoted in international newspapers, printed in journals, and shared in classrooms. That one sentence became part of modern medical ethics discussions everywhere. Camilla was later awarded an international prize for humanitarian impact in medicine. It was the first time the award had been given to someone who wasn't a medical professional. The organization said she reminded the world that medicine isn't only about science, it's about people. Her story became a case study in medical schools. Students read about how she noticed what trained professionals had missed, how she was ignored, and how she kept going. She received hundreds of letters from nurses, caregivers, and parents thanking her for showing the world that attention and love matter. Some said they now felt braver to speak up. Others said they were finally being taken seriously. Camilla didn't change her life much. She still worked with the foundation, helped Oliver with school, and lived simply. But the world around her had changed. She was no longer invisible. She was now part of the story, a story that had reached millions. For the first time, justice didn't come from the top. It came from someone who had spent most of her life in the background. Camilla had been ignored, doubted, and even mocked. Not because she was wrong, but because of who she was. And yet she had saved a life and sparked a global conversation. Her story proved that sometimes the truth is seen not by the experts, but by the ones who are present every day, who notice the small things, who care deeply. Oliver's life was saved, not just by medical tools or technology, but by the unshakable will of someone who refused to stay quiet. And now, that voice, once dismissed, had helped change the world. In classrooms, hospitals, and homes, people began to repeat her words. They weren't fancy or complicated. They were simple, like Camilla. Listen to what's not on paper, look beyond the test, and never ignore true love. His legs moved fast, strong and steady, no longer weak or shaking. He laughed loudly as he chased a small dog across the grass. His hair was longer now, his cheeks full of color. He looked like any healthy boy his age. No machines, no tubes, no signs of what he had gone through. Camilla watched him from the front porch of the house. In her hands was a tablet showing the old scan, the one that started everything. She had saved it as a reminder. On the screen, the small mass was still visible, frozen in time. It was the same image that doctors had ignored, the same one she had questioned. Now, watching Oliver run freely, it felt like looking at something from another life. She looked up from the screen to see him spinning in circles, laughing. He was alive, fully alive. William walked out and stood beside Camilla. He watched his son from a distance, silent at first. Then he placed his hand gently on Camilla's shoulder. She looked at him and saw the emotion in his eyes. He didn't try to hold it in. "You saved my son," he said, voice shaking. "And you saved me too." For William, those words held more weight than anything he had ever said in his life. A year ago, he had been a broken man. He believed he was losing his son, and along with him, all reason to live. But Camilla didn't give up. She didn't accept what the experts said. She believed in something no one else could see. And because of her, Oliver had a second chance. And so did William. He had become a better man, not just a richer one. He looked at Camilla now, not as an employee, but as the reason his family was whole again. The afternoon continued quietly. Oliver came running back toward the house, tired but smiling. He climbed onto the porch and sat next to Camilla. Then, after a few seconds, he crawled into her lap and rested his head on her chest. It was a habit he hadn't let go of, even as he got stronger. Camilla wrapped her arms around him, brushing his hair gently with her fingers. Oliver looked up at her, his eyes full of calm and peace. "Mommy number 2, he said softly. "I'm going to live now, right?" The question hit her heart. It was the same one he had asked her when he could barely breathe, barely speak. Back then she had answered with hope. Now she answered with certainty. Her eyes filled with tears, and she smiled. "Yes, my love, you are going to live. You will live for everyone who couldn't." Oliver smiled again, closed his eyes, and stayed in her arms. As the sun began to set, the sky turned orange. The light covered the walls of the house, touching the windows and sliding across the floors. But inside, it didn't feel like something was ending. It felt like something was just beginning. The rooms that once echoed silence now echoed with footsteps, laughter, and music. William had started working less. He spent more time at home, more time with Oliver. They had dinner together almost every night. Camilla was no longer called a housemaid. She had her own room, her own space, and a name that carried weight inside and outside that house. The foundation she led was helping thousands of families across the world. Still, she never missed a single breakfast or bedtime story with Oliver. Life had changed, yes. But some things remained the same, like the bond between her and the boy she had refused to lose. Their story was no longer about survival, it was about life. People from other cities and even countries continued to send letters, drawings, and stories. Many were from children who had been misdiagnosed, whose parents fought harder after hearing about Oliver. Some were from doctors who now took a second look before making quick decisions. Others were simply people who had found hope in the story, hope that things could change, that people could matter again, no matter who they were. Camilla kept many of the letters in a wooden box by her bed. Oliver liked to take one out every few days and ask her to read it. They would sit together, sometimes in the garden, sometimes on the couch, and listen to stories from people they had never met. People who now believed because they had believed first. William often said, "It started here, in this house." But Camilla knew better. It started in a moment of silence, with one small voice asking, "Will I live?" William was in the study. Camilla was folding clothes in Oliver's room. Everything felt normal. Finally, beautifully normal. A year ago, none of them thought this moment would be possible. A year ago, hope was nearly gone. But it had returned slowly, step by step, through truth, persistence, and love. Oliver turned around and hugged Camilla tightly. No words, just a hug. She knelt down to his level and hugged him back. Outside, the sun disappeared behind the trees, and the lights in the house came on. But inside, something else lit up. Something that didn't come from lamps or screens. It was the start of a new chapter, one filled with purpose. Because sometimes hope doesn't come with noise or announcements. Sometimes it comes from where no one expects it, and the impossible. It just needs someone who believes. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.